Good evening. Welcome to Tyvoll Bible Hour. I am Betsy Tyvoll, the host for our show. Tonight we've been given the rare opportunity to interview an Old Testament prophet. Christians and Jews all around the world have heard of this man and have read this man's work for centuries. Tonight we've been given a chance to interview him. So let's go see him. I think he's right down the hallway this way. Come on. Mr. Isaiah, I'm Betsy Tyvoll. Remember we called you to interview you for my show?
Yes, now I remember. I'm so sorry. Please, come in. Take a seat here. And I guess I just got caught up in some of my music, you know.
Some of your music?
Oh, yes. It was a big hit. All the way from the 1700s to the 21st century. Yes.
Well, sir, I believe you were listening to a portion of Handel's composition, Messiah?
Handel's Messiah, you say? Handel? He only wrote the tune. I was the one who wrote the words, and that's what makes the piece so wonderful. Down, Jonah, down. Quiet.
So, Mr.
Oh, excuse me. Yes.
But Mr. Isaiah, if you wrote the words to,
so hot.
Yeah, if you wrote the words to Messiah, well, you wrote them 700 years before he was even born.
Well, that's right, my daughter. God told me all about the Messiah way back then, about his birth to a virgin, being born in a small town called Bethlehem, his suffering, agonizing death, and his ultimate reign over all. Yes, I know all about the Messiah, and I wrote it down in my book. Yes.
Okay, well, what is the name of your book?
Isaiah, yeah. My book is called Isaiah.
Okay, yes, sir. Well, that's what we're really here to talk about, is your book.
Yes.
So, first of all, Mr. Isaiah, can you tell us, is your book fiction or nonfiction?
My dear, I do not write fiction. Everything I wrote is true, and much of what I wrote hadn't even happened yet.
Well, then how did you know it would happen?
Have you no upbringing, my dear? I am a prophet. And the God speaks to us prophets in a special way. And then we prophets convey his message to his people. So you see, it was God himself who told me what to write down. I guess you could say that God wrote my book.
Well, okay, before you tell us about what you wrote or what God wrote in your Bible, in your book,
yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Very boring. I lived in the 700s in Jerusalem. I was married to a wonderful...
Excuse me, what town was that?
It's English. Jerusalem. I was married to a wonderful woman. I had 2 wonderful sons. And my minister as a prophet to the kings went from, say, 740 to 680 BC. That's 60 years. Wow. 60 years.
Well, what was going on in Israel during your life?
Back in the 700s, it was a very hard time for the northern kingdom. They had strayed so far from God that God used the Assyrians to conquer them. And I saw the whole event from right down here in the south, in Jerusalem. And that was around 732, I believe.
No, sir. I think it was 722.
Yes, that's right. 722 BC.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's what your book is all about.
No, my daughter. My book is one of the longest in the Bible. After writing to Israel about their captivity to the Assyrians, God told me that my own country, the southern kingdom, Judah, would also stray from God in the future. And we would be disciplined by God with a people known as the Babylonians.
Well, when would this discipline begin?
Well, that didn't begin till 586, long after I was around. But God told me about it ahead of time. So I needed to tell the people of God about this captivity that was coming. And they would have to be able to survive it. And so I told them about it.
Wait, so you told them about the Babylonians capturing them 200 years before it happened?
Yes, I told them 4 things. I told them that Jerusalem would be leveled along with the temple. I told them that the Babylonians would capture them and they would be sent into captivity into Babylon for a long time. Thirdly, I told them that Persia would come along and overtake Babylon. And then 4, under Persia, the Jews would eventually be able to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. And yes, that's what I told them in my book. Yeah, I
Well, that's an amazing amount of important events that you predicted, sir. Those were very important events, and you predicted them.
Yeah, that was nothing compared to the 2 main events that I predicted. Coming of the Messiah. His first coming and his second coming. Now that was something to write home about.
So you knew that the Messiah would come to earth 2 times?
Oh yes, although you have to read my book carefully to understand which coming I'm talking about or which place. Sometimes I was talking about the first coming. Did you know that I knew the exact village where he was going to be born before anyone else knew? Bethlehem. Who would have guessed? A little town. And I also knew that his mother would be a virgin. Which, when God told me this at first, I thought God was crazy. He lost his mind. I said, God, you're out of your mind. The mother, did you say she will be a virgin? And God said, yes, Isaiah, write it down, write it down. Then later, God told me that this Messiah would have a terrible, painful death. And that was so difficult to write about.
Okay, but then you say you also wrote about his second coming.
Yes, now that was exciting to write about how he will be the king over all the kings, someday Lord over all the lords, and that God's people will no longer be oppressed by wicked rulers and kings, and that we will live on a restored earth. And that is really something to wait for, to long for, to hope for.
Well, okay, I was wondering if you can talk specifically the part in your book, chapter 40. Our school is memorizing right now 4 verses from chapter 40. And so I would like you to share, if you can remember, what was going on in the context of chapter 40.
Chapter 38, chapter 40, yes, well, I had just written to the people telling them that the Babylonians were going to take them into exile, into Babylon. Now, even though that wasn't going to happen for 200 years, the people were upset. They were distraught. So, in chapter 40, I was able to comfort them with another prediction. That their captivity would come to an end. That another emperor, the Persians, these Persians would eventually let them go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple.
Well, how long did the Babylonian captivity actually last?
70 years of captivity, 70 years living in Babylon, 70 years where they worshipped the fallen gods and they ate the foods offered to idols, and the kings were crazy and greedy and indulging every appetite, and our people were punished for worshiping Yahweh. People like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So because it would be so difficult living that way for so long, I had to provide a comfort for them. So I did it in 2 ways. The first part of the chapter, I told them of their eventual release from the Persians so that they would remember that they were going to not have to go on living in a strange land forever and ever and ever. Yes.
So that was your first thing. You comforted them with the fact that they would eventually go back home again.
Yes,
right?
I forgot. Yes.
But you said there were two things you comforted them with.
Yes, I forgot.
So what was the second?
I know what you're saying.
Okay.
I know. The second part of chapter 40. Now, I remember, I gave them counsel on how to live under those harsh conditions day by day. I believe those verses, those words were, let's see, verse 28, verse 39, verse 30, and verse 31.
Well, what was your advice?
Well, I told them that they needed to keep believing that God will bring meaning to their lives in Babylon. I told them that God will walk with them and give them strength even when they get tired and weary and worn out, that God would restore their energy. And I reminded them that one day their suffering will come to an end.
Wow. Well, that's quite a story,
Yes,
Mr. Isaiah.
Very good.
Well, I probably need to let you get back to your writings. I would like to thank you so much for agreeing to come on my show
certainly
tonight.
welcome.
Yes, yes.
Just one favor, if you will, please.
Well, of course, sir, anything.
Yes, I want to give a plug for my book. See, it's a very good book. Yes, so many people in the past. I want more people to read the book.
Well, yes, sir. Well, so I would like to remind my viewers out there to read the book of Isaiah.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.
And I'd like to say again to my viewers, thank you for tuning into our show tonight.
Yes, right.
We'll be back here tomorrow night, this very same time. Thank you for tuning in.
God's Lord, Almighty God, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace.